Welcome to Kindle English Podcast, your cozy space to learn, grow, and speak confidently.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Kindle English Podcast on YouTube. I'm so glad you're here. Okay, I need to ask you something right off the top. Do you think British English and Australian English sound the same? Because if you do, think again.
Oh, we're going there today.
We are absolutely going there. What if I told you that a simple sentence like, "How are you?" could sound completely different and even genuinely confusing depending on whether you're in London or Sydney? Like, we're talking unexpected slang, surprising pronunciation twists, cultural attitudes baked into the language. These two versions of English can honestly feel like entirely different languages sometimes.
You know what, Hazel? I used to think, and I think a lot of English learners think this too, that Australian English is basically just British English with a funny accent. And then I spent 3 weeks in Melbourne, and I was like, what language are these people speaking?
See? That's exactly what we're unpacking today. By the end of this episode, you'll know the real differences that most learners never notice, but that native speakers pick up on instantly. And honestly, some of these are going to blow your mind.
I'm already excited. And hey, real quick, if you're new here, welcome to the show. If you enjoy this kind of natural English conversation, make sure you subscribe to Kindle English Podcast and hit that like button. Share it with a friend who's learning English. It genuinely helps us out more than you think.
It really does. Okay, so Finn, let me kick things off with this. When you landed in Australia for the first time, what was the very first thing someone said to you that made you go, wait, what?
Oh, that's easy. I walked into this cafe in Sydney, and the guy behind the counter just goes, "G'day, mate, what can I get you?" And I know that sounds normal on paper, but the way he said it, "good die, mate." It was like the vowels were doing things I'd never heard before. I was genuinely gobsmacked.
Gobsmacked? I love that word. And that's actually a really British word, right? For anyone listening, if you're gobsmacked, you're completely shocked, totally taken by surprise. Your gob, which is British slang for mouth, is just smacked open in disbelief.
Yeah, my gob was fully smacked, wide open, catching flies.
That's such a vivid image. But you know what's interesting? An Australian probably wouldn't say gobsmacked. They'd more likely say something like, "I was absolutely stunned," or even just, "I couldn't believe it, mate."
That's true. And that's kind of the first big lesson here, right? Even words that technically exist in both countries get used at very different frequencies.
So let's actually talk about greetings, because this is where things get interesting really fast. In Britain, if you walk into a shop, someone might say, "All right," and it sounds like a question, but
Wait. I need to stop you there because this confused me so much when I first went to London. Someone walked past me and just went, "All right?" And I started actually telling them how I was doing. Like, "Oh yeah, I'm good. I had a rough morning," and they were already gone.
yes, because "all right" in British English isn't really a question. It's more like a greeting. It's like saying hi. You're not actually meant to answer it with your life story.
Nobody told me that. And then in Australia, you've got "G'day," which for anyone who hasn't heard it is basically a shortened version of "good day." But it's not formal at all. It's super casual, like the most relaxed greeting you can imagine.
And the response to "G'day," "how you going?" Notice they say "how you going," not "how are you doing?" The response is usually just, "Yeah, good." That's it. Short, sweet, no drama.
See, British people do this thing where they might say "not too bad," which sounds negative but actually means "I'm fine." And Australians would find that so weird. Like, why would you phrase something positive in a negative way?
That's such a good observation. It's almost like British English has this built-in understatement, this tendency to downplay everything, whereas Australian English is more direct, laid back.
Yeah, and I reckon that's one of the biggest cultural differences between the two. The Brits understate, the Aussies just keep it casual and straightforward.
Ooh, reckon. That's actually a word both countries use a lot, but it hits differently. In British English, I reckon means I think or I believe, pretty standard. But in Australian English, reckon is used all the time. It's like their version of I think.
And Australian will say I reckon probably 15 times in a single conversation. Do you reckon it'll rain? Yeah, I reckon. It's just everywhere.
And here's a fun one. In Australian English, if someone says, "Do you reckon?" with that rising intonation, they're basically saying, "Really? Is that true?" It's like expressing surprise.
I didn't know that. See, this is what I mean about the layers. You think you know a word, and then you realize one country uses it in a completely different way.
Okay, Finn, here's something that I think absolutely fascinates people about Australian English. Australians shorten everything.
Oh yeah, they're obsessed with it.
Like genuinely obsessed. So you know the word afternoon, right? In Australian English, that becomes arvo. A-R-V-O. Arvo.
Arvo. That's so far from afternoon that if you didn't know, you'd have no idea what someone was talking about.
Right? I'll see you this arvo. And it doesn't stop there. Breakfast becomes brekkie. Definitely becomes defo. Service station becomes servo. Bottle shop, which is already Australian for liquor store, gets shortened to bottle-o.
Bottle-o. That's incredible. It's like they have this rule where if a word has more than 2 syllables, it gets immediately chopped down and given an O or E or Y ending.
And the thing is, British people don't really do this. I mean, in British English, you might hear brekkie occasionally, but arvo, servo? No chance. If you said arvo to someone in London, they'd look at you like you'd lost your mind.
They'd probably think it was a name. Like, oh, is Arvo your mate?
Arvo's coming round this arvo. But seriously, this is such a useful thing to know if you're watching Australian TV, or if you're planning to visit Australia, or even if you meet Australians abroad, because they use these shortened words in every conversation. It's not slang that only young people use. Grandma say arvo.
Yeah, it's fully embedded in the culture. And I think for English learners, this is one of those things that can make you feel completely lost, even if your English is really good, because you studied all these formal vocabulary words, and then someone in Sydney goes, yeah, nah, I'll chuck it into Ute and swing by this arvo for a Barbie. And you're just standing there like...
Like you've entered a different dimension. Do you want to break that sentence down, actually? Because I think that's really useful.
Oh yeah, sure. So yeah, nah, which is iconic Australian, basically means no, even though it starts with yeah. Chuck it into Ute means throw it in the pickup truck. Swing by means come over quickly. This arvo, this afternoon. For a Barbie, for a barbecue.
And a British person would say something like,
No, I'll put it in the car and pop round this afternoon for a barbecue.
completely different vibe. Same language, supposedly.
Okay, but let's flip it, because British English has plenty of its own unique slang that would confuse Australians too. Like, Finn, you know the word chuffed, right?
Oh, I love chuffed. Yeah, chuffed means really pleased or proud about something. Like, I just got promoted. I'm absolutely chuffed.
It's such a nice word, and it's very British. You hear it all the time in England, but in Australia, not so much. An Australian would just say stoked or wrapped.
Wrapped? R-A-P-T? Like, wrapped in something?
Different spelling, but yeah, wrapped. It means thrilled, really happy, very Australian. So where a British person is chuffed, an Australian is wrapped or stoked.
What about gutted? That's another British one, right?
Gutted in British English means you're devastated, absolutely crushed. Like, I missed the last train, I'm gutted. It's that feeling of deep disappointment.
And would an Australian say gutted?
Some might actually. British culture has definitely influenced Australian English over the years, but it's more common to hear an Australian say they're shattered or spewing.
Spewing? Like vomiting?
I know, it sounds so weird, but in Australian slang, I'm spewing means I'm really upset or I'm furious about this. It's got nothing to do with being physically sick.
That is so confusing. Imagine an English learner hearing I'm spewing and trying to figure out if someone needs a doctor or is just annoyed.
Right? Context is everything. And I'd love to know, for anyone listening, drop a comment below and tell us which Australian or British slang word has confused you the most. We read every single comment.
We genuinely do. And they help us plan future episodes too, so don't be shy.
Okay, Hazel, I want to talk about pronunciation now, because I think this is where things get really interesting. And it's also where a lot of learners get tripped up.
Oh, this is my favorite part. So here's a big one, the word dance. In British English, specifically Southern British English, it's dance, long ah, like bath with a long ah. But in Australian English, there's actually some debate. Some Australians say dance, like the Brits, and some say dance with a shorter vowel.
Wait, so Australians aren't consistent on this?
Nope. It depends on the region and sometimes even the individual family. But here's what is consistent. The overall vowel sounds in Australian English are quite different from British English. The Australian I sound in words like or time sounds more like loik or toim to British ears.
And then there's the famous Australian rising intonation, right? Where everything sounds like a question?
Yes, this is called the Australian question intonation or high rising terminal, fancy linguistics terms. But basically, Australians will make statements that go up at the end like they're asking a question. So they'll say something like, I went to the shop. And they're not asking, they're telling you. It just sounds like a question.
That would throw me off so much. Like, are you telling me or asking me?
Exactly. And British people are kind of known for the opposite. Their intonation often goes down at the end of sentences. Very declarative, very certain. Which is why Australians sometimes think British people sound posh or serious, even when they're being totally casual.
So it's not just individual words that are different, it's the entire melody of the language.
That's exactly it. The melody, the music of it. And that's actually something that's really hard to teach in a textbook, right? You have to hear it. You have to be immersed in it.
Which is honestly one of the reasons podcasts like this are so valuable for learners. You're hearing natural speech patterns, natural rhythm, not textbook audio.
And one more pronunciation thing I want to mention, the word no. In British English, it's a fairly clean no or no. In Australian English, it often becomes now, almost like there's an extra vowel stuck in there.
Now. I can hear it perfectly. My Australian friends do that all the time.
You know what I think is one of the most underrated differences between British and Australian English? It's not a specific word or pronunciation, it's the attitude behind the language.
What do you mean by that?
So, British English culture has this thing called, well, some people call it reserve, this politeness, this indirectness. If a British person thinks your idea is terrible, they might say, "That's quite interesting, actually," with a certain tone, and every other British person in the room knows that means I hate it.
The British art of saying one thing and meaning the complete opposite.
Exactly. It's so subtle. And if you're an English learner, this can be incredibly confusing because the words sound positive, but the meaning is negative.
And Australian English is kind of the opposite of that, right? Australians are much more direct.
Much more. Australians have this cultural value called no worries. And it's not just a phrase, it's genuinely a whole attitude. Things are relaxed. People say what they mean. If an Australian doesn't like something, they'll probably tell you. Maybe with a laugh, maybe bluntly, but they'll tell you.
No worries is interesting though, because it functions as so many different things. It's you're welcome, it's don't stress about it, it's okay, it's sure, no problem.
Yes, it's like the Swiss Army knife of Australian English. A British person might say not to worry or no trouble at all or it's perfectly fine, honestly, which are all slightly more formal, slightly more structured. But an Australian just, no worries, mate.
I remember when I was in Brisbane, I accidentally bumped into someone at a bar, like genuinely crashed into them, knocked their drink, and they just looked at me and went, "No worries, mate." And I was like, in London, I might have gotten a very different reaction.
You might have gotten a very passive-aggressive, "Oh, well done," or something.
Or the classic British tight-lipped smile that says, "I'm furious, but I will never express that outwardly."
God, the tight-lipped smile. That is so British. And honestly, this is what I mean about attitude being embedded in language. The words people choose reflect cultural values. British politeness isn't fake. It's a genuine cultural system. And Australian directness isn't rude. It's also a genuine cultural system.
And for learners, understanding that is so important. Because if you learn British English and then go to Australia, you might think people are being rude when they're actually just being normal. And vice versa. If you learn Australian English and then go to Britain, you might miss all these subtle, polite signals.
Warmly. Exactly. It's not about one being better. It's about understanding the cultural code behind the words.
Okay, I want to get into some everyday vocabulary differences because there are some really good ones that trip people up constantly.
Oh, there are so many. Where do you want to start?
Let's start with being tired, because I feel like every country has their own special word for exhaustion.
Okay, so in British English, the big one is knackered. K-N-A-C-K-E-R-D. Knackered. It means absolutely exhausted. Like you've been working all day, you finally sit down and you go, "I'm absolutely knackered."
That's such a satisfying word to say, knackered. It sounds tired.
It does. And an Australian would probably say buggered or flat out. Well, flat out is more like extremely busy, actually. Like, sorry I didn't call you back, I've been flat out at work.
Oh, so flat out means super busy. Because in American English, if you say flat out, it usually means completely or directly. Like, I flat out told him no.
See, same phrase, different countries, different meanings. This is exactly why learners get confused. In Australian English, I've been flat out means I've been incredibly busy, I haven't had a second to breathe.
What about keen? Because I've noticed Australians use keen a lot more than British people.
Oh, they're obsessed with keen. So if an Australian says I'm keen, it means they're enthusiastic, they're interested, they want to do something. Want to come to the beach? Yeah, keen. Or, are you keen on trying that new restaurant? It's used everywhere.
And in British English, you'd hear keen too, but it feels slightly more formal, doesn't it? Like, she's very keen on tennis. Sounds quite proper.
Yeah, in British English, keen is used, but it's less casual. You wouldn't usually hear a British person just say keen as a standalone response the way an Australian would. A British person might say, yeah, I'm up for it, or sounds good instead.
And then there's whinge, W-H-I-N-G-E. This exists in both British and Australian English, but the Australians have very strong feelings about whinging.
Oh, yes, they do. So to whinge means to complain, to moan, to grumble about something. And in Australian culture, there's this concept of the whinging pom. Pom being Australian slang for a British person.
Wait, really? So Australians think British people complain too much?
It's a stereotype, yeah. The idea is that British immigrants come to Australia with its beautiful weather and relaxed lifestyle, and they still find things to whinge about. It's too hot, the coffee's different, where's my proper cup of tea?
That is brilliant, the whinging pom. I can see how that stereotype formed, honestly. British people do love a good moan about the weather, the trains, the government.
Everything. It's practically a national sport in Britain, complaining. But it's done with affection, you know? It's bonding.
Bonding through shared misery. Very British.
Okay, Finn, have you ever been in a situation where the difference between British and Australian English caused a genuine misunderstanding? Like something actually went wrong?
Oh man, okay, yes. So I was in a pub in Sydney. Well, they call it a pub there too, which is one thing that's actually the same. And this guy said to me, that bloke over there is a bit dodgy, I reckon.
Dodgy. Okay, so dodgy is a word both Brits and Australians use, and it means suspicious, unreliable, or not quite right. Like, that deal sounds a bit dodgy means it seems shady or untrustworthy.
Right, but here's the thing. In that context, the Australian meant the guy seemed untrustworthy, like maybe he was going to start trouble. And I understood that. But what threw me was what happened next. Someone else said, yeah, nah, he's just taking the piss.
Ooh, taking the piss. Now, this is a phrase that's huge in both British and Australian English, but it can confuse learners because it sounds, well, vulgar.
It does sound vulgar, but all it means is mocking someone or joking around or not being serious. If someone says, are you taking the piss? They're saying, are you joking? Are you messing with me?
And this is one of those phrases where the context matters enormously. He's taking the piss can mean he's joking around or he's being disrespectful, depending on the tone. In British English, you'll also hear taking the mickey, which means exactly the same thing, but is less rude.
Taking the mickey. Yeah, that's the polite version. You might hear that on British TV shows where they can't swear.
Exactly. Same meaning, just a bit cleaner. And honestly, both of these expressions come up all the time in casual British and Australian conversation. If you don't know them, you'll miss a lot of what's being said.
And here's another word that I think is fascinating. Bogan. Have you heard that one, Hazel?
Oh, bogan is so Australian. So a bogan in Australian English is basically, how do I explain this nicely?
Go on, don't hold back.
Okay, a bogan is like the Australian equivalent of what British people might call a chav. It's a stereotype of someone who's a bit rough around the edges, maybe from a working class background, might wear certain clothes, drive a certain kind of car.
But I've noticed Australians use it almost affectionately sometimes. Like, yeah, I'm a bit of a bogan, said with pride.
That's a really good observation. Yes, in Australia, calling yourself a bogan can be self-deprecating humor. It's like saying, I'm not fancy, I'm just a regular person. Whereas in Britain, being called a chav is almost always negative. There's no affectionate version of it.
So even when two cultures have basically the same concept, the attitude toward that concept can be completely different.
And that tells you something deep about Australian culture. This value of not being pretentious, not putting on airs. They call it tall poppy syndrome, actually. If someone gets too big for their boots, too arrogant, Australians want to cut them down to size.
Whereas British culture kind of respects the hierarchy more. Like there's this class consciousness that still runs through British English and British culture.
That's a whole other episode, honestly. But yes, British English carries class signals in a way that Australian English really doesn't. Your accent in Britain can immediately signal where you're from, what social class you belong to. It's loaded.
Whereas in Australia, the differences are more about urban versus rural rather than class. A farmer in outback Queensland sounds different from a lawyer in Melbourne, but it's not the same kind of social judgment.
That's really well put. And I think for learners, understanding these social dynamics helps you understand why the language sounds the way it does. It's never just about vocabulary lists. It's about the culture living inside the words.
Oh, Hazel, I just remembered something that I have to mention. Words that mean completely different things in British versus Australian English.
Oh yes, go for it. There are some dangerous ones.
Okay, so thongs. If you tell a British person you're wearing thongs,
They will think you are talking about underwear.
exactly. But in Australia, thongs are just flip-flops, those rubber sandals you wear to the beach.
So in Australian saying, let me grab my thongs before going to the beach is completely innocent. But a British person hearing that would be so confused. Or entertained.
Highly entertained. What about pissed? Because that one's a classic trap.
Oh, this is a big one. In British English, pissed means drunk. I went out last night and got absolutely pissed. That means they had way too much to drink. In Australian English, it can mean drunk. Australians use it that way too. But pissed off means angry in both countries.
So, I'm pissed in Britain means I'm drunk, but I'm pissed off means I'm angry. And in Australia, I'm pissed could mean either depending on context.
Exactly. Context saves you every time. And this is why I always tell learners, don't panic when you hear a word you know used in a way you don't recognize. Just listen to the context around it.
That's such good advice. And honestly, even native speakers from different countries have these moments of confusion. It's not just a learner thing. Like when I was in Melbourne and someone told me they were going to put something in the boot, and I hesitated for just a second.
Because you were thinking of a shoe. But boot in British and Australian English means the trunk of a car.
Yes, the trunk, the boot of the car. I mean, I knew that, but in the moment, my brain just went, shoe?
These little brain glitches happen to everyone. The more you're exposed to different varieties of English, the more your brain adapts. And that's actually a really valuable skill. Being flexible with English, understanding that it comes in many flavors.
Flavors. I like that. English in different flavors.
You know, Finn, I feel like we've covered so much ground today, and I honestly could keep going for another hour.
Same. There are so many more differences we could dig into. But I think the big takeaways today are things like understanding no worries as this whole cultural attitude, you know? And knowing that when someone says they're keen, they're enthusiastic and ready to go. Understanding that Australians shorten everything, arvo, brekkie, servo, and that British English has its own gems like gobsmacked and chuffed and knackered that you won't necessarily hear down under.
And I think maybe the biggest lesson is that it's not just about individual words. It's about the melody, the attitude, the cultural values that live inside the language. Whether someone's being indirect and polite in the British way or relaxed and direct in the Australian way, those aren't mistakes. Those are features.
And if you're learning English, you don't have to choose one. You can understand both. You can appreciate both. You'll probably develop your own mix, and that's totally fine.
I'd love to hear from you guys, actually. In the comments, tell us, are you more drawn to British English or Australian English? Or maybe a completely different variety? There's no wrong answer. We're genuinely curious.
And if you've had a funny misunderstanding because of British versus Australian vocabulary, please share it. Those stories are gold.
Thank you so much for spending your time with us today on Kindle English Podcast. It honestly means the world that you're here, listening, learning, growing your English.
And hey, if this episode helped you understand even one new phrase or one cultural difference, do us a favor and share it with someone else who's learning English. Subscribe if you haven't already. Hit that notification bell so you never miss an episode.
We'll see you in the next episode.
Take care of yourselves. Keep practicing, keep listening, and remember, every time you hear English, even when it's confusing, you're learning.
And next time someone says good day to you, don't just stare at them. Say good day right back. Own it. No worries, mate. See you next time.